competition. Will standards drop? Let the individual decide for himself what he will accept and what he won't accept. Let the individual decide if he wants to pay a higher fee for a better quality product or a lower fee for a lesser quality product. Let the individual decide. That is his prerogative. He is paying for it, you are paying for it, I am paying for it. Let us decide what risk we want to take with the money that we are spending. We don't need somebody else to impose these limitations on us. And when we have an opening of business, we may find the competition will result in a better quality of product at a lower fee. And it will break down these mega conglomerates which are protected by these license fees. So business licenses don't protect standards. They just make it more difficult for other people to enter into the field. I had the example of a patient of mine who wanted to start a business bottling fruit juice, and he wanted to buy glass bottles. He was told by the supplier that he will not be supplied with bottles unless he purchased a certain minimum amount which required an outlay of him for R500,000. A man starting off a business to invest R500,000 just on glass bottles. Do you know what this was? This was nothing more than a monopoly that was instituted to protect the larger companies so that smaller people could not enter the business. And that's what happens all the time. Why can't we have private people producing glass bottles, selling it for you at 20 at a time or 100 at a time? Why not? You may pay a little bit more if you're buying in a smaller quantity, and you'll get a lower price if you're buying more. But you, as the businessman, must be the one to decide what price you're going to pay, what is appropriate and suitable for you. Now, armed with this, I want you to apply your mind to every sort of regulation, such as building regulations. Who pays the price if you build a building that is substandard? If that building collapses, you pay the price. So, since you are outlaying your money, you decide what standard that you will apply. Seek advice. Go to a competent builder. Get somebody good that you can afford to do your work, and accept the consequences of your decision. We don't need any institution making regulations and insisting that it must be done in a particular way. That only exists in a slave system, where we are building property for the state, and so the state insists on the quality that must exist because that is the quality it wants its buildings to be built. But since it's our money, we shall decide what quality. If I want to build a home of brick or of wood and steel or cow dung, that should be my prerogative. If I want to have 5 stories or 1 story, that should be my prerogative, as long as I am not violating the rights of anybody else. Because if I build a building badly, which collapses and causes damage to my neighbor's property, who's going to bear the cost? I will be held liable. My neighbor is going to incur a loss, which I'm going to have to make do. And being a believer in God, I know that if I have harmed somebody, I've got to pay my debt. I'm not going to run away from it, because I know that God is watching and God will hold me accountable. Now, it is the Satanists that try to convince us that there is no God, so there's no accountability, so you can try and get away by doing wrong, and because you're going to try and get away from doing wrong, you must have these licenses. But these licenses are not there to prevent me from doing wrong. These licenses are there to impose their restrictions on me and to create the monopolies that promotes their own satanic friends. We don't need these things. Taxes are the biggest form of enslavement, and we have in the section on money. We don't need taxes. Taxes is there that enforces our slavery. The same applies to birth certificates. Do we need a birth certificate? No, we don't. You may want to have some proof of who you are. You can go to a mosque, you can go to a church, you have witnesses that say such and such a person, son or daughter of such and such a person, grandson of such and such a person. That is your identity. You don't need no formal document which you have to pay for. The slave masters required it. We don't. What about a passport? What about a passport? If you never travel, a passport is unnecessary. What about ID documents as a means of keeping out foreigners, proving that you are from this country? It may be useful, for that regard, but if our borders are secure, people may still come in. Now the question is, whose idea is it that in this world we must compartmentalize ourselves and try and exert the best for ourselves, exploit others, and don't care about their well-being? Is that something that's come from God, or is this something that's come from Satan? This is the ideal that I would like to see come into effect. That when we institutionalize or when we introduce a system that brings about freedom in our country, our borders would initially be sealed. And it will be necessary, because you cannot have one country isolated from the rest of the world following a certain system while everybody else is following something different. But the moment another country adopts our system of total, true freedom, then the borders between our two countries will disappear. And both countries, the people will have freedom of movement. And what we want to do is bring about an upliftment of the environment and the social standings of everybody, so that there is nobody left without food, nobody left without shelter. And you don't need a government to bring this about. All you need is elimination of all these taxes and all these licenses, to make it easy for people to get employed, to make it easy for people to earn money, to allow the cost of things to come down so people can survive with lower money, so that the standard of life will improve for everyone. There is a Chinese saying that it is countries with taxes where you find poverty. Countries that do not have taxes never have poverty. And we need to look at this closely, because we need to introduce this in our country, and poverty will disappear as a result. We will require some form of documentation when we travel to foreign countries, and we may have a administration that provides this for us, or we may have our own organizations providing this kind of document. In any case, when we become free, those other countries will demand some form of visa from us, and that visa document will be a document that will be the permission that we will get to enter those countries. So movement will not disappear because we don't have passports. Do you need an ID book? Just think about it. ID books are used in many cases today. For example, you cannot open a bank account without an ID book. You cannot open an account in a company without an ID book. But is an ID really necessary? When a company opens an account for you, they need to keep your details. Having an ID book doesn't guarantee that you will not default on your account. It doesn't provide them with any additional